Okay, so today we're diving headfirst into a situation that's about as tense as it gets. The Israel-Hezbollah conflict. We're talking about decades of, well, conflict, but this time things feel different, don't they?
They really do. The assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah is one of those events that shakes the whole foundation.
To be honest, a lot of people, experts even, thought we'd never see this day come.
Right. It's like someone hit the fast forward button on a standoff that's been dragging on for decades. And now, well, everyone's holding their breath, wondering what's next. But before we get into the whole what happens next part, we need to make sure everyone understands Hezbollah. This isn't just some random group, right? Not even close.
Yeah.
Think of them as a major player in Lebanon. We're talking political influence, seats in parliament, you name it. But there's more to it than just that. They've also got this incredibly deep network, especially in some Shia communities, where they're providing social services, controlling resources. It's almost like a state within a state.
So, yeah, complicated is one word for it. And speaking of complicated, Iran keeps coming up. What's their stake in all this?
Think of Iran as, well, Hezbollah's backer. Money, weapons, strategy, you name it, it's all flowing from Tehran. They're playing a long game here, pushing against both Israeli and Western influence, and Hezbollah. They're a crucial part of that strategy.
So it's not even just Israel versus Hezbollah, is it? More like Israel versus Hezbollah, but with Iran pulling strings behind the scenes.
Exactly. And this is why we're talking about so much more than just land or territory.
Yeah.
This is a proxy war, playing out right there in Lebanon. But the stakes, regional, ideological, the whole shebang.
And this is where I always trip up. Lebanon. Why is this one relatively small country the battleground for this massive power struggle?
Well, geography is a big part of it. It shares a border with Israel, which makes it, strategically speaking, a really valuable launching pad for Hezbollah. But it's bigger than just proximity, you see.
You mean like controlling borders, access points, that sort of thing?
Exactly. Control the borders, you control the flow, everything, goods, weapons, even people. But, and we can't forget this part, there's also the historical baggage. This isn't some recent disagreement. This goes back generations. We're talking deep-seated grievances, Israel and Hezbollah clashing over and over again. This land has seen a lot of conflict.
And now, with Nasrallah gone, well, let's just say things just got a whole lot more unpredictable. And speaking of unpredictable, our source mentions Israeli tanks moving towards the Lebanese border. Not exactly subtle, are they?
Well, subtlety kind of goes out the window when you're talking about a possible ground invasion.
Yeah.
This isn't just a show of force, right? It's the real deal, and that comes with huge risks, huge implications.
Right, because the last time Israel went all in on a ground invasion of Lebanon back in 2006, it turned into this whole month-long thing. Casualties on both sides, not exactly something you'd want to repeat.
Exactly. So the fact that they're even considering it tells us they think the stakes are higher than ever. They're trying to, get ahead of whatever Hezbollah might be planning without Nasrallah around.
And it's not just about the tanks, is it? The source also mentions Israel hitting Hezbollah's infrastructure. And not just going after specific people this time. That feels like a big deal.
It's a huge deal. We're talking weapon storage, command centers, even those tunnels they use to move fighters and equipment around without anyone noticing. Israel's trying to make it impossible for them to function, not just, like, eliminate a few key figures.
So what are they hoping to achieve here? Are they trying to provoke some kind of response? Or just cripple Hezbollah so badly they can't respond? Or both?
It's like a two-for-one deal. There's the military objective, obviously, which is to reduce their ability to strike back. But then there's the psychological aspect, too. It's Israel sending a message, basically saying, don't even think about it because we'll escalate this further than you've ever seen.
Okay, that brings up something I've been wondering about. Just how much danger is Hezbollah actually in now that Nasrallah is gone? I mean, on the one hand, he was their leader for decades. That's got to have some impact.
No question, losing a leader like him leaves a huge void. He was their voice, their strategist, the one who held them all together, and he did it for decades. This could easily lead to infighting, confusion, just struggling to come up with a coordinated response. But
There's always a but in these situations, isn't there?
right. The other side of the coin is that his death could be a rallying point. Hezbollah could easily turn him into a martyr, this symbol that fuels their desire for revenge even more than before. And that seems to be what Israel is really worried about. A wounded, unpredictable Hezbollah with nothing left to lose. That's pretty much a worst-case scenario right there.
And you know it's getting serious when even the rest of the world sits up and takes notice. Our source talks about how the U.S. State Department is practically begging American citizens to evacuate Lebanon, and I mean, that's not just a friendly travel advisory, is it?
No, not at all. That's the U.S. sending up a huge signal flare, saying this has the potential to go very bad very quickly. They don't want their people stuck in the middle if things get messy. It really highlights how fast a situation like this can, well, explode.
Yeah, just thinking about it makes me anxious. And it's not just the US, right? What about the rest of the world? Who's stepping up and who's quietly backing away?
Well, you've got Russia calling for everyone to chill out, especially Israel, which honestly is kind of surprising because they aren't usually ones to get involved in these kinds of things.
Yeah, Russia usually takes a more hands-off approach, let's say. So why the sudden urge to play peacemaker?
Now it gets interesting. This is where you see those geopolitical gears turning. Russia might be seeing an opportunity here to position themselves as mediators, maybe even drive a bit of a wedge between the U.S. and Israel. And hey, it doesn't hurt to score a few points with Iran while they're at it. Everyone's got an angle.
Speaking of Iran, that feels like the big question mark hanging over all of this, doesn't it? I mean, Nasrallah was, well, he was their guy. How are they going to respond to this?
That's the million-dollar question, and the problem is there's no easy answer. They've been backing Hezbollah for decades, so not retaliating, well, that makes them look weak. But going too far could light the fuse on a regional conflict, and nobody wants that. They're in a tough spot.
So break it down for us. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, and everything in between. What are we looking at here?
Okay, so on the less terrifying end of the spectrum, you've got a measured response from Iran. Maybe a few targeted strikes on some Israeli assets, perhaps through their allies in, say, Syria or Iraq, just enough to save face without triggering massive retaliation.
And if things go south, what happens then?
Well, worst case scenario, Iran feels like they've got to respond with, well, overwhelming force. We're talking about missile attacks on Israeli cities, cyber attacks that could cripple their infrastructure, maybe even attempts to block the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow waterway that's basically the world's oil pipeline.
Okay, yep, I'm officially stressed out now. Are you saying there's a chance this could spiral into, like, a global energy crisis?
There's always a chance. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. The international community, even with all its usual drama, knows that a bigger conflict would be disastrous for everyone. People are working behind the scenes trying to de-escalate things. Diplomats, back channels, the whole bit.
Well, let's hope those diplomats are better at their jobs than I am at parallel parking. Okay, so for our listener who's now completely up to speed on this whole tangled situation, what should they be watching for in the coming days and weeks? What are the red flags?
All eyes on Iran. Are they making aggressive speeches or are they quietly talking to diplomats? Watch for any unusual military activity, and not just from Israel and Hezbollah. Are Iran's allies mobilizing? And keep an eye on the global reaction. Is everyone on the same page, or are those alliances starting to crack?
So basically, stay glued to the news, but, the smart kind of glued, not the panicky kind.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? The more you understand the history, the politics, all the different motivations, the better you'll be able to cut through all the noise and form, your own informed opinion.
And that, my friend, is what the deep dive is all about.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
But I do have one final thought for you to ponder. Is something like this, the death of one man, even someone as influential as Nasrallah can throw an entire region into chaos, what does that say about the long-term prospects for peace in this part of the world? Is this a turning point, for better or worse, or just another nerve-wracking chapter in a very, very long and complicated story? Keep thinking about it, keep asking those tough questions, and we'll be here to help you dive deep into whatever fascinating, terrifying, and thought-provoking corner of the world grabs your attention next.